So when there's not a Davey, Brandy forgets to hit the go live button. So what you guys missed was a fantastic introduction. There were fireworks, there was a parade, there were elephants. It was really quite something. But unfortunately, you missed that one because I forgot to go live. So instead, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. And I'm just going to say, first of all, welcome to Scott Carney, who is also having to deal with me and not Davey, bless his soul. Hello.
Hey, how you doing? That was great. It was a good practice session.
It was.
And I think we're all loose and ready to go. Everyone, we have drinks, so go get them.
Yes, we have drinks. We have drinks, and not only that, we also had a wonderful comedic routine that you guys missed. So it's okay. We're going to do it now. The drink is lovely, but I forgot to give it to Scott. So Scott has created a secondary drink that's going to work for tonight. That's going to go in our book at the end of the year.
It's a bottle of whiskey.
It's a bottle of whiskey. It's a Scott Carney special, High West whiskey, straight.
Yeah, and there is ice in the drink.
Ice in your drink.
I do. It clinks. Do you hear that? It's clinking.
And we do have drinks. Good. I'm so excited. Yes. So several people are like, I thought I was losing it. No. This is Brandy. This is Brandy not knowing what she was doing. Yes. Don't tell Davey. You're all going to tell Davey. I know you are. High West is tasty. I agree.
Agreed.
So the drink we chose for tonight. Hi, Scott, says Susanna.
Whoa, Susanna Spear. Wow. I haven't talked to you for ages. That's great.
So she's with us tonight too. And I'm going to make sure that all their comments pop up. This makes a lot more sense. I was getting comments, but it didn't. Yeah. Moving on. The drink we chose was partly we were trying to kind of capture the strangeness, right? We've got a chili ring. It's kind of hot, spicy. There is actually, there's a worm in mine. It's got the tequila and it has green tea in this one. And there's a mocktail as well. And Kathleen Richards says it's so good. Thank you. I'm so glad. I do try to keep us in mocktails as well. We always pick a name. And tonight, I have to say, it was Sarah from New Zealand who came up with the Wim Hof quaff. And mic drop, I don't think you can do better than that. So you will be getting a pin, a lovely squid pin, Sarah. And thank you very much for the fabulous name. We'll pick some more winners later on. Maybe we need to name your cocktail, since your cocktail is straight whiskey, Scott Carney. Like, maybe we need to have somebody. You guys come up with some names, and we'll read them later, and we'll pick another winner. Why not? So
there was one that I heard of called the Hemingway Gone Fishing, which was just 8 ounces of gin, and we could do something like that.
Yes, Susan agrees. So peculiars. I also have. We do not have a Davey, as I have clearly shown, but we do have a Mark, or Lady Paws.
Hello.
He's here with us this evening. He's going to be bringing serotonin in the form of small fuzzy things. So he's going to pop back in just a little while. We're gonna say goodbye for a minute. Bye.
Goodbye.
So Scott, I started off asking a question which nobody heard the answer to, so I'm going to start again, which is, I feel like your writing is so adventurous, your life is so adventurous. In my mind, people just airdrop you into situations with a typewriter, and that's just how this all comes to be. But I thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about where you got started. Again, technically.
Sure. Oh, I'm thinking maybe I should make up an answer that's totally different than the last one I gave you. So for me, I started out as an anthropologist. I got to the dissertation of the PhD and dropped out. And the fundamental question, I dropped out to become a journalist. And the fundamental question of all the books that I've ever written is what about these situations make us human? Mm-hmm. And for me, and for any journalist really, what we're interested in is not who you are when you're sitting on your couch watching Netflix and your biggest decisions are, should I watch mm-hmm. Girls? I don't even know if that's on Netflix, or Game of Thrones, which is definitely not on Netflix, right? Where interesting things happen is on the edges, where things are stressful, mm-hmm. where things are difficult, and where your decisions are not necessarily clear and that they matter. And my first book was about organ trafficking. So buying and selling human body parts, that is a very extreme moment. Why would somebody want to sell a body part? Why would someone want to buy a body part? And why would someone want to maybe commit some pretty bad crimes.
Right. That's called the red market, by the way, guys. If you haven't
It's
heard
over. It's funny. It's reversed over here, so it's like that. There we are. But when we start looking at things like the wedge or what doesn't kill us, I've sort of taken this idea forward to sort of sensational moments, right? When we get to a place where your sensations and your emotions are pushing you to a point where you have to make a decision, right? That's what the wedge is. The wedge is like you're feeling something and you have to make a decision whether you're going to run or whether you're going to deal with it. And so in a way that the wedge is the most distilled version of Scott Carney before Scott Carney goes off to other things.
I got it. And maybe in light of that, Sharon suggests that we should call your version of the cocktail tonight the Troubles.
That sounds very Irish to me. Let's come up with
it does. It does.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. Yes, you're right. You're not wrong about that. We wanted Davey and I, even though Davey couldn't be here, he's here in spirit. Davey and I wanted to sort of see how this wedge might work in a situation like you describe, which is also like parenthood, says Susan Ballinger.
For sure.
And so we thought we would take this to agent finger guns. Yes, to agent finger guns and see, when a person is under a lot of pressure, how that might work out. So we're just going to do a quick look at agent finger guns under pressure and see how that all goes. See how the wedge kind of works out. I'm in trouble.
Agent Finger Guns. Nice of you to ring.
Look, I sabotaged the computer, but the goons are waiting for me. Now I'm trapped. What do I do?
Have you considered your automatic nervous system?
My what?
We all feel under fire when faced with stressful situations. Did you know incremental genetic adaptations hone the physiology of nearly every creature on this planet? Humans can wedge control over automatic physiology responses like fear and pain. It can give you an edge in almost any situation. Think about how humans can live in extreme conditions, or even how we can adapt to things like oxygen deprivation or ice water. You just need to find the wedge.
Okay, right, so the wedge, right. How do I do it? How do I use the wedge?
Well, join us for a chat with Scott Carney. He's the investigative journalist who climbed mountains with Wim Hof shirtless, no less. In fact, he'll be joining us at the Peculiar Book Club soon. Why not join us? There will be cocktails.
Well, yeah, you should have said. So when you're in extreme situations, that's
like being shot at when you're a spy.
Shot at when you're a spy, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. Right. You're right. That does sound. That Professor Peculiar does sound a lot like the dog phrenologist we had on last week. It looks a bit like him too, now that you mention it, Kristen. By the way, that's what I look like if I were blonde. Interesting. But we actually really we enjoyed making that one, but also it's kind of true. And I was thinking about the fact that we do watch a lot of these. We watch James Bond or spy movies, but these are people who really are literally living at the very edge. And you think, how could they possibly make decisions that fast? How could they adjust scenarios that writers exactly the same. Just Scott and Brandy Bond right there. But I in reading your book, I realize everybody actually has that potential to a certain degree, right? Oh yes, Sadie Simmons says Brandy's book, and I've got that way. It's hard.
It's hard with this, yeah.
On the shelf. We're like book buddies. But what you prove is that anybody pushed to a certain limit, like you do think faster, you do respond faster, you do, not do James Bond stunts, but I can see how this kind of works out.
Well, the thing is, when you're in a stressful situation, And whether it is emotional, whether it is physical, really no matter what it is, that you sense that stress. It comes into your skin, comes into your sensory organisms. And the reason why you're conscious is that everything, all of those sensations are giving you choices, right? Whether when you get into the very cold area, your body may say you have to get out of here right now and into a warm spot, or your mind could be like, but I have to go through this cold area and then I have to make it okay. And I wouldn't say, with your example with the spy under gunfire, the wedge is not a survival technique in the sense of like you're in an acute situation, you're going to get killed by an assailant. What it is, though, is allows you to modulate your response. So if you are panicking and you're out of control, the wedge is one way to sort of get that stuff back in control.
Stephanie, I'm with you on that one. I have trouble with my social skills at the best of times. Susan Ballinger actually says she'd rather deal with an active shooter than a cocktail party. It's kind excuse me, it's kind of true. To me, it's about what you tell your brain. I honestly, I decided to try snowbathing after reading this book, and I went outside and I thought, okay, so what happens if I tell myself that this is fine? Now, I'm not trained, so obviously this didn't go as well as I think you'd have performed much better, Scott. But I laid
the first time I jumped in an ice bath, I cried, so maybe not.
But it's just, we laid in the snow and I thought, okay, I like this. I'm trying to tell myself, like, I like this. Yeah, I like this. This is good. This is good for me. I'm down with it. And it is odd. It like sort of stopped noticing how cold it was. Like the minute I did it, I was like, go inside. But after I was out there for a minute, you do kind of relax. So I gave it a go, Alexandra says she loves it. So I wonder how many situations in general are like that. I mean, you're not just talking about ice water anymore. Wedge kind of moved beyond that.
Yeah. So the thing is that you're using the wedge the way the term that I'm using is the wedge, but other people have other words for it. You're using that ever since the moment you are born, right? You're born basically. Babies, I don't know if you guys know this, but babies are weak. They're freaking weak, and when they're born into this world, they can't really control their body at all. Like they can't control their poop. They're just learning to breathe. They don't know how to eat. I mean, they're weak. But the process of going from basically a brain trying to figure out how to interact with the outside world is all the wedge. And I can't remember what it was like to be a baby, but I'm going to imagine that as I'm a kid, I'm lying down in my crib and my hands might be moving, but I don't know why. And then all of a sudden I see a hand and I'm like, whoa, I did that. That is the wedge. That is the wedge, because you're expressing control first over your nervous system and then the outside world.
Right.
You're taking yourself from autonomic to nomic. There should be a nomic word, right? Yeah, under somatic control.
And for me, that's the kicker, because today we heard that Russia has invaded the Ukraine, and my body did all kinds of things without my permission. My heart rate was up and my stomach was turning. I don't know. You guys go ahead, make me feel better. Tell me how you were dealing with today. But and I couldn't concentrate, and I thought, wow, I've just experienced like a massive loss of that somatic control. I feel like suddenly I'm just I floating around, at the whims of my body reactions to something that's a stress that I honestly can't do anything about. And so I was thinking a lot as I read The Wedge, a little bit less so with the, though that's true of What Doesn't Kill Us too, but specifically in what you talk about in The Wedge, how can we harness this for living in I don't know, pandemic, climate change, wars, what can we do? How can we use this every day so that our lives are a little bit less chaotic?
Well, so the critical insight probably in The Wedge is that sensation is emotion and emotion is sensation. There's an equal sign between those two things. And I also had an emotional reaction to hearing about Ukraine last night, right? I think it's a horrible situation. I feel out of control. My breathing went up. And But that experience it happened in two places. One, it happened in my mind. I'm thinking Ukraine. I'm thinking invasion. I'm thinking nuclear war. Whatever else is going on in my mind there.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the physiological stuff, and you have control to a degree on how you want to interpret those sensations. And I will say, like, sometimes you want to be stressed out. Sometimes a little stress is bad. Like there's a negative wedge where you just sort of like totally bliss out and you don't pay attention to reality. So I wouldn't say you want to like disconnect and disassociate.
Right.
But when you do physically hard things, this is the way. This is ice water. This is this stuff that with fear. When you do physically hard things, you become better at dealing with physically difficult sensations, which also gives you a certain resilience to emotionally difficult situations, because sensation equals emotion. And a very negative way to look at that is like you're just sort of burying things deep. You're not touching them. But that's not really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to say that in these situations, you have a choice whether or not you're going to freak out, whether you're going to let your mind spiral to the end situation where all of a sudden we are actually in nuclear war, or we're like, oh no, we're right here. We know we can see what that situation is, and my response will be appropriate and not exaggerated to what is currently going on.
Yeah. Well, and like Lexi was saying, her fiance just got back from the Middle East, and so like there's a lot of tension, right? We are all kind of, I would like, Sharon, I agree, like to live in slightly less interesting times. But at the same time, like there's so little we can do about it. And earlier on I put up Jennifer Pierce was saying like I was not okay today. It's okay to be not okay. I think mentally. The trick is, stress is so bad for our bodies. I have autoimmune disorder, and there's lots and lots of evidence, increasing evidence, that autoimmune disorders are, if not caused by stress, at least massively exacerbated. Stress.
And I think caused in many cases, for sure. But there could also be genetic and other underlying things that
there's
are
lots
going
of
on.
Yes, but and they've checked, like there will be twins, and one will have, and one won't. It depends on like what kind of experiences you've been through in your life. So if we can try to reduce that stress on the body, that alone, I don't think it's not pretending that the situation is okay. That actually doesn't work anyway. When people are just like, just stop being stressed, I just want to throttle them, which would relieve my stress.
Right. Well, that's interesting, because that's sort of the wellness paradigm, right? In the exaggerated idea of wellness, it is you will insulate yourself from the things. So you get one of those massages on a spa bed, right? Where you control your diet in a way that the bad things don't happen to you, because the outside world is the danger. With the wedge, it's sort of a different philosophy, which is expose yourself to the things that are difficult and then teach your body to adapt to them. So you should feel stressed sometimes. Like you have to get into situations that are emotionally intense, that are physically intense, that put you in a risk environment. And then you realize that, okay, when I'm in that, I can actually control myself, which gives you a broader range for where you can be, so that when you are watching Netflix on your couch, you can really watch Netflix on your couch.
You're
not only there. And that's really what this difference is as you get exposure, what the Greeks call hormesis, right? When you expose yourselves to dangerous, difficult things, that stress, that damage, that allows you to grow. Yeah.
And I think, Kathleen was saying, sometimes we feel numbness, but the numbness is not the wedge. That's almost like, it's like we've just shut down, and then all of a sudden it can come roaring back. Anna Lopez was talking about feeling so much heaviness, and it doesn't necessarily erase the sadness that we feel. And so, like, with that in mind, we're going to take a quick serotonin break for everyone, because I see Mark has brought some friends here. So we're going to serotonin break. Do you want to show us what you got there, Mr. Mark?
So in treating such situations, one may need to seek the help of a little peeper number 1, or if blonde is not your color, little peeper number 2, or little peeper number 3. Let's see if we can get them all. These little peepers are 3 days old.
Wow.
And yes, they are very, very good for the spirit.
They are. They are. Their names are Edna, Matilda, and Frankie. And they will soon be joining our chickens outside. So if you guys needed a little bit of love, there's our little baby chicks.
Here's a little love. Yes.
Thank you, Marky. We all need a little bit of that in our life. Yeah, we got a lot of awes happening here. Aw. I did see a question before the chicks, and I want to recapture it. Where she was talking about went to a Korean spa and had like hot, cold in 3 minutes, and she had kind of like these epiphanies. Is that something that we're calling the wedge? Is that similar to what you're talking about?
I wonder what she means by epiphanies there, but certainly when in the Korean spas, which are awesome, you're going from hot to cold, and the cold is very, very intense, right? The signal you get in ice water, or Korean spas are like 50 degrees, so it's close to ice water, is death, right? Your body doesn't have a lot of language. It's like, I'm in death, and then you say, no, it's not actually death. You were wrong, body. I'm gonna live. And then you become. What happens is you relax in the stimulus of death. And then you say, oh, it's not. It's actually something I can handle. Mm-hmm. And then there's also some cardiovascular stuff and neurological stuff that's happening there as well. Mm-hmm. Then when we switch to hot, that's comfort, that's warmth, that's love. That's your body being like, oh, I'm safe, right? Yeah. And like that's where, and so in physiological terms, we have sympathetic, that's your fight or flight responses, that's in the ice water. And then when you're in that ice water and everything is saying go sympathetic, you tell yourself, no, I can relax and I can be parasympathetic. And then when you go to the hot, in a Korean spa, it's basically a sauna, and you're just actually going deeper into that parasympathetic when you're there, and you're letting your cardiovascular system relax because it was just very intense before. So you're going back and forth. In terms of the epiphany, I would need to know a little bit more about what you were thinking, but I will say yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Lorelai asked a question which is kind of related. So it's one thing we can go into this physical stimulus and kind of relax into it, right? But that doesn't always happen. I'm with Lorelai's. I can go into information collection mode, right?
Sure.
I'm a researcher. It's what I do. I'm also autistic, so it's not surprising that that's my go-to. But it sometimes doesn't help, because there it seems like you're sinking deeper, but instead of it you getting used to the stimulus, it's like you're ramping up. Does it not work with the brain? Is it only a body thing?
It does work with the brain. The thing is that we evolved with certain problems, right? On the African savanna, in our like prototypical background, right? Your problem was scarce resources, maybe dangers from animals, maybe these sort of very physical and immediate issues. And so when you saw the lion and it was charging at you, you threw your spear, you ran up the tree. You didn't like check out the lion's 401k plan to be sure he was qualified to go attack you, right? You didn't have there's this evolutionary mismatch there. And so when we're in a problem now, we've gotten to a point where the dangers that face us are no longer existential and immediate. So we go into information gathering mode in order to try to game out what could be existential problems down the road, like having health insurance, taxes. Those are all things that might, I guess, kill you later in certain ways.
In their own little ways, yes.
But what we need to do is, if you live all the time in your head, which we a lot do, right? We sit in our home offices and we're in our heads. If you go out and you give yourself physical stimulus, that is what your body has been craving. Like we want to when the insurance man, or sort of the IRS, comes and says your tax bill is due, our bodies want to smash his head with a rock. You can't do that in the modern world.
Spear. Where's my tax forms? Tax forms. That's what I meant. But you know what though? It's interesting. Alexandra just followed up, by the way. She was saying that like a sort of deep gut feeling arose, something she had been sort of kind of holding down, and then when she had the hot and the cold, it sort of came out.
Yeah, that's a blood pressure thing.
That's a blood pressure thing.
But that's great. I mean, so when you're in the cold, you constrict, all your blood goes to your core, and when you go into the 200, you expand. And so sometimes in those situations, you'll have feelings of disorientation and some other stuff. Those are all sensations that can also link to emotional experiences too, because you may have held similar situations at various points in your life that are somehow connected neurologically in that whole section where I call neurological symbols.
Yeah. Well, and so Stephanie's just like, hey, I'm autistic as well. Yeah. Now you guys know why I have so much trouble keeping eye contact with the camera. But it's
because the camera's over here. It's like over there, and you're over here.
I'm not good at it at the best of times. Yeah. But it's true, and I think I carry a lot of trauma from not being diagnosed autistic until quite late, and so you carry that around without realizing that you're carrying it around, and then something happens which seems unrelated, and it's triggered in that and it's you're wired kind of strange. Susanna asks, what's your take on secondary trauma? Take someone who survives a violent crime and gets blamed for perpetrating the crime by the justice system. In other words, someone ends up getting traumatized as much by the paperwork and all the stuff as they as they would by the actual trauma. How can they use exposure therapy? Like, is there a way for that to be useful?
Totally. And the thing is, I mean, there are a lot of things to unpack in that situation. When the trauma first happens, maybe we're talking about rape here, right? Or some sort of an assault or something like that. There are going to be many things that occur in that moment that are not only the trauma, not only say the sexual violent trauma, but your systems are so heightened in that moment that you're capturing every sensation. So the amber quality of the light is coming in. That's getting encoded. The smell of that person's breath, but also the smell of the poinsettia across the room, encoded. The way the blinds are tilted, certain colors, all of that gets encoded at trauma at the same time, because trauma is an intense experience. All your neurons are like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. Or whatever they're doing, they could be doing 50 different things. But all of that, because the way your brain collects information, gets created into this neurological package that then gets stored away. Then the next time you experience that poinsettia, someone's poinsettia, that can actually trigger those other
unlock
experiences because they're linked. Right. So one way to and you're talking about secondary stuff with the justice system. I'm going to leave that aside because that's actually a whole nother can of worms. But let's just talk about the rape in the room with the poinsettia. And now every time you see a poinsettia, it freaks you out, even if you're not realizing that you're looking at that poinsettia.
Right. You don't even know why you suddenly have, high blood pressure or whatever.
Totally. So one thing you can do is the exposure to more and more stimuli. Well, I talk about neural symbols as if they are books on a shelf in a library. And every time every time you have here's my trauma symbol. It's all backwards. Here's my trauma symbol right here. And that's going to be there. And I can actually never get rid of that. Your brain codes stuff, and there's no like garbage disposal to vanish it. But what you can do is put more and more books on that shelf. So you can have your positive poinsettia experience too. If you care about poinsettias, you can also say, fuck poinsettias, I don't care. But you want to start reattaching things, especially to the other symbols that got coded in that traumatic experience that could trigger it. You want to add new valences to those things. And you can do that by exposing yourself to those objects, those stimuli, or your own body in ways where you reduce all the stimuli around you, so in a place like a flotation tank or meditation.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then you're able to actually look at some internal stimuli, because what was also getting coded was your heartbeat, was your blood pressure, was the dilation of your eyes, was the way your ears were doing stuff. I mean, all of that stuff gets coded.
Right. Well, Kristen is asking, and this is about how to acclimatize. She worked at an aquarium with surface feeding fish, and was saying that like she's jumpy about movements. Is there a way? Is it the same kind of thing? Is it like you need more books? We got to send Kristen off where there's other jumpy animals too, or how would you fix that kind of a situation?
So, two things come into mind. There's the parasympathetic way and there's the sympathetic way. The parasympathetic path is spend more time in nature. where things happen unpredictably, but maybe aren't always bad. Don't go to a reserve of mountain lions, but go to a place that's sort of safe in nature. Expose yourself to more and more stimuli in a safe place. And that's important, because if you're going to a war zone and you don't feel safe, you're not going to encode the right symbols. You'll encode the danger that's present in the environment.
Right.
The other way to do it, and this will be controversial, and I'm sort of making this up, but I think this will work, is to watch something like a horror movie, right? Where the stimulus coming in is emotionally traumatizing. I cannot stand horror movies. I would never take my own advice here, right? Could not watch it with jump scares. But if you're in a situation which has a positive valence, you're with your lover, you're with a good friend, and you have this fun side to this that can encode those jump scare moments or those fish surfacing moments with fun. And this is what our brains, our sensory systems pick everything up at once. Right. And you can actually recode that if you really want to. And it may not be super easy, because remember, those scary fish moments are still going to be on your shelf.
Right.
Like, that book never goes away. It's there for your whole life. Your library can only grow. So you can you have the option of pulling more books off the shelf, but you'll never truly get rid of it.
It reminds me of, so I'm a historian of death and grief. And one of the things that I really try to convey when I write about grief and do grief work with people is that, when you lose someone important to you, it's a lot more like it's like an amputation or something. That doesn't change. What happens is your life grows up around it. It's not really, people talk about, your grief will shrink. That's not entirely true. It's there, and then you try to build things around it. So it sounds really similar, I think, to certain kinds of grief workshops and other things that I've heard. Leanna asks, where do out-of-body experiences originate? Seeing yourself sort of down there, and you talk a little bit about the yoga experience. That was mind-blowing. You're like holding your breath in the yoga studio. Partly I felt bad for the yoga, not yoga, but you're in a yoga studio. The breath instructor, like, Scott, like, hi, yeah, there's people in here, Scott. But how does that, what is operating there? And obviously this has been slightly officiated in the last couple of days with the brainwave post-death. There's this idea of what your brain does.
I did not read that article. I saw the headline.
I'm going to write about
it. Give me the cliff note. Give me the cliff note on that, because it sounded cool.
So I'm in the process of writing an article response, because obviously I just did all this stuff with brain death and everything. But in the moments of death, they captured it accidentally. They were looking for something else, but they happened to have this brain scan as this person died. In the moments right before death, the brain kind of goes, whoo, and this like big wave happens. Possibly after you've already died. Like, that was the fuzzy thing, is that they were like, some of this is actually going on after you've.
I read a book about death, and it seems like it's very, very squishy about what death is. I don't know if you've seen it, but the moment of death seems, I don't know.
Right. But they said what lit up in the brain were all the memory centers. So when you say like your life flashing before your eyes, that might actually happen in a very physical kind of, all the neurons that were in control of memory kind of went, hey, right before the end. And so an interesting question.
Or not. I mean, they just had, they saw some waves on the machine. Like when I turn off a TV set, there's like a little flash too. What is it remembering the show? I mean, we should take a couple steps back from what I'm hearing from your Cliff Notes version of what was going on. But the question between what happens. The question about what happens between body and mind is super interesting. In terms of what you were talking about, though, when I was hyperventilating and holding my breath for many, many minutes, like 7-8 minutes or something like that, there is this thing that happens, which is a DMT response, which is when you die, supposedly, you release this chemical called DMT out of your pineal gland, and it gives you all these visions. Well, you can also access surprisingly similar visions through this breath work. And they call DMT the spirit molecule, the death molecule, these things. The reason why we know that you release it when you're doing this breath work is not because we have we put a scientific meter into your pineal gland to say we've released it. It's because we know a lot of people have recreationally done DMT exogenously. They smoked it out of like toad venom. Like, oh yeah, that's really a similar experience. So take some of this with a grain of salt. But if it is the same, what is going on is you are experiencing to some degree what you might experience in death. And there is this, for me, when I've done this, I've had that sensation of going forward down a tunnel and things are awesome and really interesting, but maybe I should hang out in the real world. And I do not know if I would die if I had kept on holding my breath, but I was definitely told to breathe. My guess, though, is that I wouldn't. My guess is that I would have passed out and then I would have reset
would have
in that circumstance. So you can do that. In terms of the above, seeing your body outside and looking down, I have no clue. Got nothing on that.
But it's very interesting how many of you out there, I used to ask this of my students all the time. I would say, what's your earliest memory? And they would tell me. And then I would say, okay, did you see yourself in that earliest memory? And a lot of them did. And then they realized that it couldn't actually have been a memory. It was probably something they heard or were told or saw from pictures. So, so often we actually do picture ourselves. They're not direct. I know my earliest memory was of a horse's nose. That's probably a real memory because I wasn't in it. Like I was just focusing on. So it's complicated.
I remember my hands going, and I'm falling face first down a stairwell, and I'm watching myself. That's my first memory. But again, I may have invented that.
I learned how to walk at 8 months, and then I just kept getting away from people. So anyway, somewhere I ended up with a horse. But I have a lot of stories like this. Somehow I ended up with a horse. That was before I got kicked out of preschool. So, but I think that, when we say we see our bodies, I'm not sure that we don't kind of do that a lot anyway, because we do sort of avatar ourselves.
The homunculus is a super fascinating idea, right? I don't know if you've ever seen a photo of this, but like the way your neurons, your nerves, understand your body is this thing called a homunculus. Go Google it. And it's this like, where you have more nerves is actually represented in your body as a bigger thing. So we have giant lips, giant genitals, giant hands, and giant feet. But the rest of us is actually not sensed by our brain as much. My elbow is not super sensitive, so it's not really represented very much. So, and homunculus look a lot like gnomes, like weird, fleshy gnomes.
I've seen these. I've actually seen that. I think they did a display of this at the Welcome in London. I think they did these. They had like several of these kind of unusual things. Two things that I was just thinking about, and then we have a question from Kathleen, which is pretty interesting about how to use the wedge today. The one is that, in the Victorian period, they thought maybe your eyes recorded the last thing you saw. So they were trying to remove the corneas from dead murder victims to see if they could see the killer's imprint on that doesn't work.
That would have been awesome if they could, though.
Awesome, right? That would make a great story, but it doesn't work. It is this kind of idea that somehow you're recording stuff in a specific way. And so it's funny, we poo-poo that and we make fun of it, but yet we take a lot of liberties in analyzing brain scans, which might be just as fuzzy in the interpretation. So Kathleen has a question here. She says, how about the wedge in the never-ending COVID world? How can, because it's true, people are becoming extremely overwhelmed. And particularly healthcare workers, but I think all of us really.
Yeah. Here's the thing is that healthcare workers are overworked, and you are being put into a situation by a financial, economic, healthcare bureaucratic system that's making you unhealthy. The truth is you do need to expose yourself to a variety of stimulus, but it is so overwhelming that it's hard to do. And I don't know. I can tell you that I understand why so many healthcare workers are quitting right now.
Sure.
Because the environment that you inhabit is itself toxic to your nervous system. That what you should be doing, my get is you should be exposing yourself, if you can muster the energy, to powerful sensations outside of healthcare. Whether this is the Wim Hof breath work is super easy to do it in the morning. It's 15 minutes in the morning.
Or like really at the spa, like that sounds like she's doing really good self-care for that, as far as that goes.
Yeah. And if you're in a situation that constantly reinforces stress, I can't give you a magic bullet to make yourself a better worker. Sometimes the actual environment, the actual situation is stressful.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about. Yeah. And we expose ourselves over much, I think, we don't get this kind of breaks. I know I personally I almost have like intravenous connections, like matrix level connections to social media, which is not good for me. So we do need, I think, a lot more breaks involved. I see a question from Jeff, and it's an interesting one. What's your relationship with video games these days?
I love this question, because at the end of the Wedge, I'm doing ayahuasca in Peru, and I realize I have this addiction to video games, and I vomit up video games into a bucket, a dirty, dirty bucket, and out with it went my desire to sort of get sucked back into these sort of addictively neural created video games. And so here's the thing: after I did that experience, I didn't play a video game for a year. Nothing. I was just like not even interested.
Yeah.
And then COVID came along, and I played a little bit because there was time. I was stuck in my house.
Right.
And they were fine. They were fine. I played them. I did not get too wrapped up in them. And then I don't play them at all right now. I have a much healthier relationship with them, but I'm still cautious of that. There's the possibility to get neurologically tied back into them. And I wouldn't say that just doing ayahuasca destroyed the potential for me to get re-addicted to them. Like, that is still possible.
That's out there. Yeah. Yeah.
But it did stimulate me. It did, when I did that, all of the things that were currently encoded were gone after that experience. And that was really interesting to feel.
It's interesting, the kinds of things. I know this from my parents. My parents have both struggled with addiction, but the addictions are very strange. We're all used to thinking about addiction to drugs, of course, right? Yes, drug addiction, alcohol. But my dad has a very addictive, stimulated personality, and so he became addicted to bread at one point. So it's like if you are someone for whom it's like this kind of predisposition, I think, however it comes from, that anything can become addicting. I know that I personally am a little, maybe a small amount, addicted to work because I get stimulated from that, right? I'm always
so Andrew Huberman gave an interesting quote to me a few years ago, where he said that addiction is the progressive narrowing of the things that give you pleasure. And I think that's a really nice thing to do, is that because you find that the fewer and fewer things that can make you happy give you pleasure, and this is why the Wedge is so important. Is it's giving you're finding by exposure other things that you can do. It's breaking you out of your the narrowing of addiction, of comfort, of these sorts of things.
I just wanted to put up, because I think this is kind of weirdly related. Chloe Rogers was saying she remembered someone in the UK government suggesting healthcare workers should do yoga on their break, and people were like, how are they going to eat and do yoga in the 30 minutes that they're allowed? And I think that's the other thing, is we have systems that are not always ready to, the systems around us are part of the problem too. And I think we always have to be careful not putting so much of the onus on the individual person, because some of it is you're just in a crap situation and it's crappy, and there isn't a whole lot.
And there's also the weaponization of some of these effects, which I think is really interesting. It's like, for instance, the military was putting snipers through mindfulness training. And the purpose of mindfulness is not to make someone a better violent sniper, right? There are things that are sort of contradictions. So they're teaching someone to quell their nervous system, but they're putting that stuff in a context which is dangerous or wrong.
Right. No, I agree. And I think this is always the trick. Whenever we talk about things that are, on one hand, a kind of self-help, a kind of self-care, but we live in times where you're expected to go do your self-care on your own time and then give 180% to, we have a lot of broken systems in this country. So, and several of them were talking about trying to use timers for things. Leanne was talking about using timers. Alexandra talking about how that you're taught to be a martyr. I think there's so many different things that combine, and timers can be useful, other things. But honestly, okay, Lexi, yes, go march, Alexandra, do it. But one of the things that I think is really important is realizing that there's a limit to what we can do. The Wedge is there. And I'm excited about it. I've been enjoying learning about it. I know Mark has been enjoying reading What Doesn't Kill Us, and learning a ton from that too. But there's limits to what we can actually accomplish versus what the systems allow.
I mean, you can become a more efficient worker by doing this stuff, right? Like you could, by doing your ice bath, getting your preparations, doing your breath work, dedicating time to that, and then putting yourself in the situation, you'll be able to endure that stressful situation longer. But I think the important question is that we should also be looking at the stresses that you're giving yourself passively, that versus just the active one. And there is this work-life balance part. I mean, I guess in the Wedge, a cynical reading of it is I could make you a more mindful sniper. I could make you a more healthcare worker. But what Scott Carney, the writer, is like, don't necessarily do that to yourself. Don't push yourself to sort of craziness, because we need variety, right? And if your job is always full on, then that's actually the problem.
Right. Well, we're getting closer to the end of our show. I have a quick video to show all of you. Then we're going to have our quiz. So you guys need to be ready. You gotta be ready, because we're going to quiz Scott Carney, and I'm going to try not to mess it up because Davey created it especially for Scott. So, but first, I wanted you guys to know we had a little bit of time not too long ago to meet the peculiar in the field. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Fraggle Rock, but
I love it.
Yeah, right. So the uncle who sort of travels around and sends letters back to the Fraggles. Okay. So we have our own version of that. We have a traveling peculiar, traveling troubadour in Cord Ravenswood, and we decided to share his origin story today. So here we go.
Not far from the places you may have been are other places. Places off the well-known, oft-trod paths. Places that hold secrets and wonder. There may be one around the corner from you now. And in these mysterious coves of our world, you will find Cord Ravenswood. You know him as a traveling troubadour, an explorer and chronicler of the uncertain and seldom seen. But how did Cord Ravenswood come to be your peculiar in the field?
Well, as a boy, Cord was shy and did not speak until he was almost 3 years old. We worried about him, Ash and I. In fact, his father was at times rather confused by Cord's silence. "The boy has so much to say, so much life in him, you can see it in his eyes," he'd bellow after taking little Cord out for a jaunt in his ebony perambulator. But I could tell Cord was just very curious. He was keenly watchful.
I was teaching the children about the lost colony of Roanoke, Virginia, and the quiet, weird kid raises his hand, and I called on him, and he speaks for 33 minutes. I timed him, talked about plague and food scarcity, the indigenous population at the time, the weather conditions on record, and something called a Sasquatch rumpus.
Cord became interested in folklore and folk music. Soon he formed his first band, Snallygaster.
Oh, Snallygaster was great. We had a following and we even toured a little bit. I remember one time we picked up this last-minute gig for the military at an air base far away. I remember that the stage lights were high above us and they seemed to be spinning. Oh, pretty country. I hope to return to Roswell someday.
As the young man grew, so too did his appetite for the unknown.
Cord just really needed to spread his pedipalps.
In time, I realized I wasn't going as far as I needed to go.
We were all surprised when Ciara went to Wittenberg University to study history on scholarship, but looking back, it all made sense.
At Wittenberg, I roomed with a Danish kid. He was really nice, but he had to leave suddenly when his father was killed back home. It was around this time that I went abroad to study in Russia at the Rasputin Institute. That was very illuminating. Did you know? It was quite a thing.
The first time I saw Cord Ravenswood? Well, I had stopped in for a cocktail at a local speakeasy here in Cleveland, and a man was espousing a drunken tirade about whether or not the protein expressors that code our DNA could experience a form of biological cognitive dissonance. And then he sang a song about neutrinos. I knew I had to get him for the show. He originally turned me down, though.
Oh, Brandy was great and all, but I just didn't really feel a connection. Oh, but then I met another one of her contributors, Finger Guns. She had a really fresh perspective, and she was the one that convinced me.
To this day, I honestly don't know if he understands.
Finger Guns is great.
What has a life of wandering investigations taught this hirsute hero of hiking, history, and horror? Hear tell.
You know, an eclectic named Halo Wines once said to me, Cord, you're already going far. You just need to go farther. She was right.
Whoa.
So now we know. Now we know where that peculiar in the field comes from. He's a little confused, a bit like the Fraggle Rock uncle, which I think it all kind of it comes together. It comes together well. He's one of us, is what I'm saying. Okay, it's time for the quiz. I'm going to try and do this. I have to switch back and forth for your comments. So here's how this works, Scott. We've got a quiz for you, and luckily, you have help. So basically, the peculiars can help answer the question. They can answer the question.
When you put that video together, did you like purposely make all these references to my wife's podcast, or was that just totally random?
It's totally random.
So weird because the Snallygaster, Sasquatch, Roswell. My wife has this podcast called Wild Thing, and all of that stuff gets mentioned.
So I didn't. So actually, Nick is the one behind that particular video. I'm sorry. I mean, Cord Ravenswood. Lovely guy. Okay, so here's our questions. We're about to queue these up. It's gonna disappear Mark for a minute, but Mark's still here. He can help too. All right. First question. Can you survive the movie quiz? So we're trying to take movie versions. This is something Davey does often. It is sort of related to the book. In the movie Tracks, Robin Davidson's attempts to trek 2,700 kilometers across the Western Australian desert with these animals as her companions. Now we've got 3 answers here. A, her cat and elephant. Her dingo and kangaroos. Her dog and camels. So now I'm going to go here. Let's see. What do you guys think? Leanne says C. All right. Mark, do you have any?
I'm feeling Leanne on this one.
You're feeling Leanne on this one?
I feel like that just seems more logical because I have cats. They hate hiking. I don't know anything about dingoes, but I know they eat babies, so no one wants to go hang out with them. So it's got to be camels and dogs.
And I naturally navigate towards camels with it being a desert, and who has an elephant hanging out?
Just hanging around in Australia, yeah.
But you know what? To be different, I'm going to pick B.
You're going to pick B. Okay, all right. So now I've got to go back here and find the answer. The answer is C, her dog and camels. So we got that one right. Hey.
Makes sense.
It does make sense. Okay, question 2. In the movie Life of Pi, what is the name of the Bengal tiger that shares the lifeboat with Pi as they float across the ocean? So it's not Pi.
I feel like I know this one.
So A, Ronald Porter. B, Richard Parker. C, Robert Patterson.
It's definitely an RP, right?
It seems that way, yeah.
I think it's Richard Parker. I think I saw this on an airplane once.
Okay, anybody else? Anyone else have possible questions here for the RP?
And I didn't see it.
Discussing the dogs and dingoes versus...
I'll pick A.
We'll pick A. Okay, Sharon's going with B. Susan's going with B. Any other takers? Or you said B, Richard Parker. All right, let's find out. Let's see what he did for us over here. It is B. Oh, you're doing really well. Normally we fail these quizzes terribly. Way to go.
We're rocking, guys. We're doing it. We're doing it.
Okay, here we go. Carney, here you go. In the movie The Martian, stranded astronaut Mark Watney is able to reestablish communication with NASA by using what? An old Mars probe?
So I just let other people guess because I know this one.
Oh, you know this one. Okay.
I know it.
Okay, smoke signals, flashing light at a satellite. All right, what do we got over here? Let's see here. A. Kristen Meston says she has a cousin named Richard Parker. A. We got a lot of
it's a tiger. That Richard Parker is a tiger.
Points. A.
It's freaking A.
It's freaking A. All right, here we go.
I'll choose A as well.
I have to hang on. now I've got to disappear the comment here.
Although smoke signals would have been cool.
Smoke signals would have been way cooler. Way cooler. I agree. All right, now I have to take the quiz down. I'm no good at this. There's Mark's
Can you
face.
name the probe? Was it Pathfinder? Was it
Pathfinder? Oh, I kind of like that.
I think it might have been Pathfinder. Anyway,
it's all you, man. I have no idea. I think that's a frog. Is it a frog? It's very cute. Susan, I kind of love your little emoji thing there with the squid and the otter. Loving it. So that's our quiz. Our quiz is always a lot of fun. You did really well. Usually we just kind of fail these typically. Like there's a giant
we don't fail in Wedgeland. We get this right.
Wedgeland, there is no failing. There's no failing. I think it was Pathfinder, Leanne says, and she's likely to know actually.
There we go.
Stephanie says Julius came. You got Julius. Oh, that's fantastic. Julius is a squid. He's our mascot and on our pins. And Stephanie got the plush version of him for winning our contest for the last time, which is great. Yay for Julius. Yes. His name is Julius Sees Her.
That's right.
Sees her. Okay. So we still have a little, I know we're running short of time. And so I just want to ask if you guys have final questions for Scott. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours about this because it's the book is mind-blowing to me in a number of ways.
I got a whole bottle of whiskey.
We could be here for all night, man. I ran out of my drink and I'm not eating the worm because I feel friendly towards worms. So, mostly we just have a lot more squid comments happening over here. What I love about your book is that there's a lot of self-help books about this kind of thing that are all frou-frou, but I ran a medical anthropology journal for a decade. And so I'm very keen on anthropology. It's so nice to read a book that feels like this is a real investigation into how these things work. And it has the science and it has questions and you try things out. And I tried things out. I threw myself in the snow for a couple of days. I think the most amazing thing was that I found myself agreeing with you a lot on experience-based things. You talked about the fact how you stop being cold. I mean, you're cold, but you're not. And I snow bathed, and then I went out and took the chickens into the yard. And it was 20 degrees, and I was in my shorts and a tank top, and I didn't even notice. I thought, well, that's weird. So it was
all the
so
neighbors
nice.
did, but
all the neighbors did
not.
that. Yes. Right. All right. Just Joe. We have a neighbor named Joe. He noticed. Alexander said, super amazing topic, absolutely amazing, inspiring story. What is the name of my old journal? Culture, Medicine, and Psychiatry, a medical anthropology journal that I ran I was the managing editor of that for a decade. Honorary anthropologist as a result. We actually publish anthropology articles at Medical Humanities too. So, we do that.
So I'm very excited about reading the rest of What Doesn't Kill You, and then also the Edge. And the Edge, based on what you've talked about, kind of takes me back to when I was younger. I had asthmatic bronchitis that was facilitated through secondhand smoke, and so I had trouble breathing. Age 15 and on, your body just says, you know what, hey, we're gonna give you trouble breathing. And then, just kind of thinking about this, I just instinctively didn't want to be on the medicine. So I started walking and jogging and then eventually running, punching through that wedge type thing. And then now I run, 3 to 5 miles, every time I go. So
it's kind of crazy. Like he does it on.
The body is amazingly adaptable, and the more you do things, the more you find you're capable of. And usually, when people tell you there's limits, they're wrong. Because you know your body better than other people. So other people looking at you as an object is going to be different than you understanding yourself as a subject.
Right.
But I want to answer Jeff's question.
Yeah,
Jeff's question is like critical, which is that is there a connection between tinnitus and the Wim Hof method? And I had posted something on Reddit about this not so long ago, a year ago or something like that, because there've been a lot of reports about people who are doing cold exposure and the breath work, and they're coming up with constant ringing in their ears. And it's interesting. I've met people for whom the Wim Hof method has cured tinnitus. And I have met people for whom, after doing the Wim Hof method, their tinnitus gets much, much worse. And I think that there's something that's not totally understood here, but what we do think we do know is that tinnitus comes from the sympathetic pathway, right? There's something about that stress pathway that gets interpreted as ringing in the ears and triggers that nerve or whatever it does to cause the tinnitus. And I would say, if you start seeing ringing in your ears that lasts more than, say, 30 minutes after doing the Wim Hof breathing, maybe back off of the Wim Hof breathing. Because maybe don't do it as much, because you might have a physiology or some other stuff that's encoded in there that makes you more susceptible to tinnitus. And it's not a good thing to have. I get ringing in my ears, but it's bearable, so I'm not too worried. But for some people, tinnitus makes them go commit suicide. So
yeah, it's nothing to be. Yeah, I mean, everyone's body responds to things. I mean, some people respond well to cold. Some people respond well to heat. Some people respond well to chiropractic care. Some to acupuncture. I do think, one of the things that modern medicine has lost is that sense of individuality in approach. I just reviewed Invisible Kingdom, great book, and just like this is a great book. We've got a lot of great books going on with us, but
mine's the best because I'm here right now.
Yours is the best because you're here right now. Absolutely.
Right.
And I'm actually going to get a Wedge tattoo right there. Actually, you know what I want? I want the DMT molecule tattoo. Death molecule seems like very metal to me. Like that seems like that should be a tattoo.
Have you ever done DMT? Has that ever crossed? Are you a drug user? I don't know.
No. So my life is pretty trippy as it is. So I feel like I don't need help.
We mentioned this.
Yeah. Mark can attest to this. I'm out there enough as it is, but I find all this fascinating. I know we're over time and people are probably like, need to go get dinner or something, but this has been fantastic. I'm so glad you've been on. I feel that I feel we're going to see you again. So I'm really excited to have you. And I'm sure for your next book and you did say you were working on a brand new project. Could you give us a preview before we sign off?
So many projects, not one, like 8. I have this book that comes out in March.
Vortex. Yep.
About climate change and the deadliest storm in human history and how it almost triggered a nuclear war. And it's getting great reviews. And you are going to review it in the Wall Street Journal.
I hope so.
We're going to be great. It's going to be awesome. So that comes out in March, but I have 2 other books that I'm working on. One is super secret, so I'll tell you right now. It's about Santa Anna, the guy who killed everyone at the Alamo, and why he's actually a hero. Ooh. And then, hashtag banned in Texas. And then and I'm working on a book on medicine and how we can think about Western medicine in a better, more holistic way. So
I like it. Oh, I agree. I think that should be next. DMT, Lexi. Big climate change reading binge. Okay, look for the Vortex. You know what? I'll try to get.
Well, I also have a YouTube channel that I'm just starting up, so all of you subscribe so people can listen to me yammer about.
What is it? I'll put it in the text here. What is it?
I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Google Scott Carney YouTube. That's what you need to. Oh no, where'd you go, Scott? We lost him. Mark, are you still there?
I am.
I don't know where he went.
Yep, I don't see him.
Uh-oh. His meter was up. You guys, it was wonderful to have you once again. Thank you for being here if you're weird, and you are, your family.
You got the blue bottle blues when you wake up in the night. Don't make a big mistake, 'cause you can never make it right. When you reach out for the vial, feel the ridges in the glass. It's a matter of survival, baby, better watch your back. There is no antidote